So I have had a lot of bad teachers in my life, and as an educator myself, I don't say that lightly. Part of the reason why was because the high school where I graduated was absolutely horrible. And I know a lot of people say that, but I know that mine was probably one of the worst. For one thing, the school I graduated from was absolutely tiny. We had about 170 students, K through 12. We were also in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cotton fields. We were essentially 35 minutes away from the nearest sheriff, and I know that because they had to be called regularly for fights. And most of the time it was fights between students, but I have seen my fair share of fist fights between teachers and students. And in hindsight, I think we had about 3 types of teachers there. The first type was a teacher who had just graduated from college and needed any job on the resume. The second type was a person who was raised in that little farming community and never wanted to leave. And the third type, and the most common at that school, were teachers who could get hired nowhere else. And so they ended up in our little farming community. And there was very little learning that took place. The classrooms were absolute chaos. So when I found myself at Baylor trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, I eventually decided that I might want to be a teacher. And when I decided that, I started making a notebook in my head. And on one side, I started writing down things that I never wanted to do as an instructor, ever, based off of things I had seen in my past. And on the other side, I started trying to make a list of things I wanted to do or teachers I wanted to emulate. So my first semester at Baylor, I was talking to my advisor, and I was instructed that I had to take a physical education class, which blew my mind. I was an English major. Why in the hell do I have to take PE? But in any case, I had to do that, and they gave me a list of things I could take, and I said, I'll take bowling. And they went, no, bowling is full. Bowling is always full. You can't take bowling, take something else. So I looked down the list, and I thought, okay, if I can't be Big Earn McCracken from Kingpin, I guess I'll take karate and be Daniel LaRusso. So I decided to take karate. And it was the luckiest accident that ever happened in my entire life. I learned so much from that class and that instructor. For one thing, my wife and I fell in love because of that class. But for another, I met an instructor who literally changed my life. So the instructor of that class was a guy by the name of James Melton. James Melton was a third-generation Shotokan karate practitioner. Shotokan karate is one of the 4 original karates from Okinawa. Its founder, Gichin Funakoshi, took karate from Okinawa, transformed it into an academic curriculum to be taught in universities in Tokyo. And so it's highly regimented and designed to be taught to college students. So that was James Melton's past. That's what he had learned to do, and he'd been taught by old Japanese guys. In addition to that, he had degrees in education, and he had taught in all kinds of classrooms, from elementary age students to juvenile detention students. And James Melton had this unique ability to bring a class back from the brink of chaos. I'd never seen anyone be able to do it. He also had this unique ability to admonish behavior, but not the character of the student. And there's something very important about that. And so after I graduated from graduate school and took a job at the University of Texas in San Antonio, the thing that I kept in my mind was James Melton's ability to bring a class back from chaos. It didn't matter what it was. Students talking, he could bring them back. Students arguing, he could bring them back. And I wanted to channel that as an instructor. And that ability has been tested a number of times. The first time it was really tested was a few years after I started at UTSA. I was in the middle of a lecture, and before I begin, it's important for you to understand I have a very strict attendance policy. One of the things I learned from Melton was that 80% of learning any new skill is showing up. So we have a strict attendance policy. So I'm in the middle of a lecture, writing on the whiteboard, students behind me dutifully taking notes. And the layout of this room isn't great because the door to get into the room is over here in the corner. So that means that if a student comes in late, which is annoying to begin with, but if they come in late, they have to walk past me and past the classroom to get to their seat. So it's doubly intrusive. Writing, students taking notes. The door swings open. Immediately I am enraged. But I try to hold it in, try to remain stoic. I look up at the clock. It's 17 minutes after. That's not a tardy. That's an absence. But I decide to myself, you know what? Let the student get to his chair or her chair, and I'll deal with it after class. Best not to make a big disruption about it. So the student starts shuffling, is the best way to put it, to the seat. Now, normally when students come in late, they got a little bit of a pep in their step. Not this one shuffling like a walker from The Walking Dead. And then I hear from behind me the entire class gasp And it wasn't a gasp of, oh my God, Professor Gifford's about to chew this guy out. It was a gasp of, oh my God. So I turn around and look. And by this point, the student has shuffled almost over to his seat. And it's a student who has had trouble with absences in the past, but when I look over, that's not what's concerning to me. What's concerning to me is the cut. No, the gash that starts right here in the middle of the forehead and ends about right here at the top of his head, and the copious amounts of blood pouring down this kid's face. And the other students are freaking out, rightfully so. Students don't want to touch him. He's wavering. He gets to his seat and he plops down, and it's obvious that he's not focusing on much. And I'm like, Andrew, are you okay? What has happened? No response, just wavering. And I've seen concussions. That's what they look like. So I run over and I get in front of him and I go, Andrew. And he starts to focus. What has happened? And he looks at me and he says, I can't be late again, Professor Gifford. Please don't fail me. I'm like, Andrew, let's not worry about that at this point. What has happened to you? And he just keeps wavering. I can't get another tardy, sir. I can't get another tardy. And at this point, students are freaking out, so I stand up and I tell one of my athletes, I want you to take Andrew over to the Health Services Center. You're going to have to help him. He's not going to be able to do it under his own power. I want you to run ahead of them. Tell the nurses over there we've got a student who has been injured. Everyone else, please sit down. We're going to finish class. I'll give you an update on Andrew later. And I felt proud of myself. I felt proud because I was able to bring the class back. I was able to make these students feel safe. I was able to get help for Andrew. And I was later told that the reason that Andrew was in fact late for the class, or was injured, was because he was late for the class, and in his haste, he ran out in the middle of the traffic and was struck by a car. And apparently, the only thing that his concussed brain could remember was, don't be late again. So I was proud of that too. And I felt like James Melton would have been proud of me as well. But there was another incident that really tested my ability to bring a class back from chaos, and I'm not sure if I did. So we're in the middle of student presentations, and student presentations are a big deal in my class. I expect them to be multimodal, so they have to use PowerPoint slides and audio and video and all that type of stuff. And they have to give the presentations extemporaneously, so no notes. You have to actually memorize what you're supposed to be presenting. But the room we were presenting in was horrible. It was one of the oldest rooms in UTSA, no technology. It was just a box of concrete. That was it. So every day before class, I'd have to put in a work order for a portable screen and a portable projector so that the students could hook everything up. And it's important to understand the layout. So at the front of the room, portable screen. Right in the middle of the room, portable cart with the projector. And then the students would have to stand in front of the projector so they wouldn't obscure the screen. Hopefully that makes sense. So a group is presenting, and I think they're presenting over something about pollution. I don't really remember that part. But they're in the middle of their presentation. It's time for one of their videos to be played. And it was a video, I do remember this, about pollution in the Atlantic Ocean. So the guy whose computer it is, Eric, starts to walk around, and he turns on their video, and he comes back, and his group continues to present. Unfortunately, the video that Eric started was not a video about pollution in the Atlantic Ocean. It was a porn. And it wasn't a porn between two people having sex. It wasn't a porn between three people having sex. It wasn't a foursome even. It was a porn with a, how to describe it? Pile or mountain of greased up, beefed up, sexy dudes just going right at it. And let me be clear here, I have no problem with a group of dudes getting it on. In fact, if I had been at home, I probably would have watched the entire video, if for nothing else, to admire the athleticism. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was it was playing in the middle of my class, and the students immediately flipped out. There was one girl that just went, no! And there was a bunch of people who were laughing. And in my head, I'm like, but I have to just say, I have to remain stoic. I have to just go, turn it off. Eric, turn it off. Now, the real funny part is this group has no idea what the hell people are going crazy for because they're not looking at the screen. And so Eric turns around and he immediately turns back and goes, it's my sister's computer. I'm like, no one gives a shit, Eric. Turn it off. And so he runs around. The entire group's freaking out. He runs around, and unlike a normal person, Eric doesn't just hit the X button. I've never understood this next part of the story. It's completely true. Instead of just hitting the X button, he starts punching keys, and then the sound comes on. So now, not only are we watching the video, we are inundated with sounds of moans and groans and wet sounds, and people are now just leaving. Eric is flipping out. He stopped trying to turn the damn thing off and just keeps going, it's my sister's. I'm like, no one cares. So he finally gets it turned off. And at that point, I make the executive decision, we're done. We're done for the day. There's no way I'm getting y'all back. So we're going to resume next class with the same group. Eric, no porn. No porn next time, Eric. And it was that day that I learned that no matter how hard I try to channel James Melton, there are some forms of chaos I will never get a class back from. Thank you.